one and I stand on that. You and me, babe, that's black on black.
There's a lot of commentary about Democrats and Republicans, left and right, and this and that. And there's also a lot of commentary around the immigrants coming into this country. And, there's a knee-jerk reaction, at least I have it. So I'm going to, just talk about me. There's a knee-jerk reaction when, I hear people talk about immigrants, for me to defend people coming into this country, because primarily I understand that America's hands are not clean as it relates to some of these nations that surround us. And these people are coming here not because they want to leave all of their family members behind and traverse dangerous waters, possibly die in flip-flops, walk hundreds of miles to get to this country for safety. They're not just coming here to rape and take your jobs and do all of these things, as Donald Trump would have you believe. I feel like they're coming here because we made it unlivable in the places that they are. And I kind of relate it to the Great Migration, right? Like Black people had to leave the South, not because they wanted to leave their farms and their homes and their families, or uproot their families, but because it was dangerous for them to stay in the South and untenable for them to make a living in many of these places. There was terrorism and night riders and crosses burned and lynchings. So the Great Migration happened twice in this country because of white terrorism in America. So I kind of liken folk leaving their places in a similar way. All right, so I'm going to put the number out, 866-801-8255. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you. But it's a complicated issue, and it's not left or right or Republican or Democrat, right? But the Republicans have figured out how to touch on that nerve. So I'm going to read a story about Brian Silva. He lives in San Diego County. He has, I want to say 78 acres. Brian Silva's, he bought 78 acres a couple of years ago in Southern California on the border of Mexico, right? His land buttresses up against Mexico. It's about 75 miles east of actual San Diego. And so he bought this land, and he has three dogs. And he said in the middle of the night, his dogs, Whiskey, Soldier, and Freedom, would be barking incessantly. He would go out to find people on his land, migrants, people passing through his land. It has become so common in the last 2 years that Whiskey, Soldier, and Freedom no longer bark. Like it's just, it's these people just coming across. And I think about the folk that live in Texas and Arizona and on the border, the border used to be Mexico. John Quinones talks about it. I interviewed him a few years ago, and he talked about, when he was born, he was in the United States, and then the line got drawn, and then they weren't in the United States. It was like they got drawn out, based on the borders moving and shifting. Or he was in Mexico, and then he was illegal, based on the borders moving. But I think about the people, because I've heard folk call up the show who live in California and other places, and if you are, imagine you bought this many acres. And every day people are traipsing through your backyard, basically, even if it's 78 acres, that's a lot of land. That's your land. You pay for it. It's yours. And maybe, there's all manner of, people going to the bathroom or whatever. Like I think about your quality of life and how you move to a place, and especially in California, the taxes are high. You're paying a lot for mortgage and rent. Like it's not an easy conversation to have. And it just speaks to, just like we talk about unhoused. I could talk about unhoused from a standpoint that I think everyone should have a roof over their head. But if I'm living in Los Angeles and I got to step over people, or New York, and I got to step over people every day to get from here to there, they're still human beings. I'm not going to dehumanize them, but it is a nuisance. If you have to step over human feces, which I have done in the streets of New York, and that it's human feces and not dog feces, right? It is unlivable for people whose homes are in the backdrop of these places, right? And if you live in a town that is overrun by folk who are coming here with no money, no opportunities, nothing, and then you see them getting resources that you couldn't get as an American, it will foment in you a certain level of disgust and disdain for those people, as opposed to a system that has driven them from their homes into here, and a system that then also provides them with resources that you yourself can't get. Right? It's kind of the conundrum and the hypocrisy of folk who have served this country with distinction, who are now unhoused, who can't get, proper medical attention because for some reason, the value is not there anymore once you've served. Like, we have to deal with that as a nation and not make it a Republican versus Democrat issue, but figure out how we can talk about it. Mr. Silvis, who I absolutely, can identify with, he said, if I had the money, I would build my own wall right here. I don't have the money to do that. He said he witnesses dozens, if not hundreds, of migrants crossing onto his land every day. An influx, he says, that has worsened since the expiration of Title 42 back in May. For years, people have been crossing illegally into the United States, and it would often run away. People would run away from law enforcement, but now they want to be captured. Why? Because a lot of the resources are no longer there for them. So they willingly want to go to jail because they know they're going to get 3 hots in a cot. They know they're going to get shelter, food, clothing, what they will not get now because of Title 42 being lifted. And, it's frustrating, I guess. And at the same time, we have to have capacity for the people that are coming here. These kind of conversations and how we have them, how we have the conversations, not calling people animals, not calling people, pariahs, not calling people dogs, calling people who are having an experience that they're before the grace of God, go us, that I wouldn't wish on anybody. I don't know anyone who willingly is crossing hundreds of miles to come into this country. And I'm not talking about the cartel. But it's the same conversation that we should be having as it relates to what's going on in Israel, as it relates to what's going on in Haiti, as it relates to what's going on in several countries in Africa, what's going on in Ukraine. We have to be able to center humanity and then center history and then have a conversation that focuses on the 3 C's that Kevin left us with: context, put it in context, compassion, and then we challenge the system. I'm going to follow this myself, and I thank him for the words.
I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves things is the one